Good evening and welcome to Pune International Center's Ambassador Speak series. I am Abhay Vaidya, Associate Director. This is our fifth lecture in this series, and our previous distinguished speakers have been the ambassadors of France, South Korea, Brazil, and Bangladesh. We are honored to have with us today His Excellency Mr. Mohamed Maliki, Ambassador of His Majesty the King of Morocco to India. Along with India, Mr. Maliki is also ambassador to 4 other countries, namely Nepal, Bhutan, Maldives, and Sri Lanka. He will be speaking to us on regional emerging challenges of Morocco and its role, along with its partners, in the development and the stability of Africa. One of India's major foreign policy initiatives is to strengthen ties with Africa, and in October 2015, the third India-Africa Forum Summit was held in New Delhi with the theme Reinvigorated Partnership, Shared Vision. This event saw the participation of a galaxy of heads of state from Africa. Today's event will most certainly help enrich our understanding of Morocco and the African continent. His Excellency Mr. Mohamed Maliki is an alumnus of the Pakistan Diplomatic Academy, International Institute of Public Policy and Management, Malaysia, and the National Defense University, Washington. He has previously served as the Director of Asia and Oceania Affairs in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation of Morocco, and as Deputy Ambassador at the Moroccan Embassy in Islamabad and in Cameroon. He was also head of Eastern and Southern African Countries Department in the African Affairs Directorate. His Excellency is fluent in Arabic, French, and English. Welcome to today's event, sir. Today's session will be chaired by Ambassador Sudhir Dev, former Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs, and former Director General, Indian Council for World Affairs. Ambassador Devre was the first Indian ambassador to Ukraine, Georgia, and Armenia, and opened the Indian embassies in these newly formed countries in 1992. He has served as ambassador to South Korea and Indonesia and was a member of the National Security Advisory Board during 2002-2003. Ambassador Devre is a founder member of the Pune International Center. Welcome, Ambassador Devre.
Thank you. Thank you.
Eminent scientist, National Research Professor, and Pune International Center's President, Dr. Raghunath Mashelkar, Padma Vibhushan, will be presenting the welcome address. Welcome, Dr. Mashelkar.
Thank you.
Also on our panel is Dr. Vijay Kelkar, Vice President, Pune International Center, and a distinguished Padma Vibhushan of India. Today's event will begin with the welcome address by Dr. Mashelkar, followed by the opening remarks by Ambassador Devre and the lecture by His Excellency Mr. Maliki. You are welcome to post your questions in the chat box for the question-answer session, which is a part of this program. May I now request Ambassador Devre to kindly initiate the proceedings.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Vaidya. Dr. Mashelkar, President of PIC, His Excellency Ambassador Mohamed Maliki, Ambassador of the Kingdom of Morocco, Dr. Vijay Kelkar, and other distinguished people who are in the audience this afternoon. In the series Ambassador Speaks, Pune International Center has indeed taken a very useful initiative, and as was conveyed to you just now, already 4 lectures by eminent ambassadors stationed in India have already been delivered. And today we have the honor and the pleasure of listening to Ambassador Mohamed Maliki, the ambassador of the Kingdom of Morocco. Well, Morocco really, as I said, conjures mystical images, and those in India, all of us really get fascinated by even the mention of the word Morocco. I had the good fortune of visiting Morocco a few times, particularly for international conferences at Marrakesh. Later on, also at the Indian Council of World Affairs, we were very happy to initiate a kind of a dialogue with Maghreb countries. And in that, of course, the role of Morocco was very important. India and Morocco have traditional links which go back to really centuries, and in the recent times, they have been further strengthened by high level visits. We were particularly happy when uh, His Majesty King Mohammed VI, he visited India in 2015 at the time of the India Africa Forum Summit. And this idea of the summit, which started some time back, has been really one of the important features of India's outreach and India's relationship with Africa. Excellency, today Africa is always regarded as a success story. It is in a way a secret which many of us don't know. And we see African economic growth, its development are on a high growth trajectory. In that regard, the Maghreb region of North Africa is very important. It is a kind of a key region, and in that, Morocco, one of the large economies, really plays I think, a very important role. As we understand, Morocco is already the fifth largest economy in Africa, in the African Union. Morocco is certainly playing a very important role. Well, I think Morocco, as um, an emerging country, fast growing country, I'm sure is also faced with number of problems which many countries, including India, are faced with. Problems of multilateralism. How to balance between bilateralism and multilateralism? The problem of globalization. I think whether there should be excess globalization, there should be whether there's an inadequate globalization, or how do we deal with various challenges which globalization has brought to us. Such questions, I'm sure, like India, Morocco also may be faced with. Excellency, you are going to speak about the regional developments or regional challenges which Morocco faces. I'm sure you might have thought of challenges like the challenge of immigration. I think today most countries are really battling this challenge of immigration. We have all faced with a very grave threat of terrorism, cross-border terrorism. So I think there are very common kind of threats and challenges which country like Morocco faces, and India also shares that. So we are really looking forward to listening to you, Your Excellency, and we want to find out the commonalities between Morocco and India. And in many ways, I think these can be kind of a learning exercise for us too. So we are very thankful to you that you found the time today to speak to us. And as my friend said, Morocco is special to us. So we would like to find this as a very rewarding experience. Thank you very much. And over to you, Excellency. Kindly enlighten us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for these nice words. And I think you have already spoken about some of the important challenges that we are facing all together. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wa salatu wa salamu ala ashraf al-mursaleen. Mr. Misharkar, President, Pune International Center, Excellency Ambassador Divari, Mr. Vaidya, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. A very good evening to all of you. Let me start by expressing my gratitude to the chairman of Pune International Center and to His Excellency, Foreign Secretary, former Foreign Secretary, Mr. Vijay Gokhale, good friend, who unfortunately was not able to attend today's lecture, for inviting me and giving me the honor and to address a distinguished audience. In 2015, the famous Moroccan thinker and philosopher Abdullah Laroui stated that Morocco faces unique pressures from immediate neighbors, effectively making it an island encompassed with shark-infested waters. However, though there were many reasons for him to make such statements, many historians disagree with this infamous declaration, to use their words. We all agree that Morocco has a very special and strategic and unique geographical position, linking 3 continents and 4 worlds. It is in the extreme northwest of Africa, at hardly 10 miles from Europe, and the closest country to the United States from the west side of the Arab world, sharing together with the States this vast ocean, Atlantic Ocean. Thus it links the African, Arab, European, and American worlds. It lies also between 2 enormous bodies of waters, and should therefore adopt at the same time an Atlantic policy and a different policy for the Mediterranean. Not only do the 2 important bodies of water meet at the Strait of Gibraltar, but Morocco constitutes the crossroads and the melting point for numerous cultures and civilizations. However, this unique position, while being a blessing, I admit, it also encompasses continuous internal and regional challenges that the governments have always been tackling and would have to take as a challenge. Indeed, emerging challenges involves existing ones. And since we live in a dynamic environment and neighborhood, new ones always emerge. Ladies and gentlemen, nobody can deny that the currently health sector has become the priority of priorities after the break of COVID-19 pandemic. It has put the health sector in different countries, be them wealthy, developed, or developing, into very much strain. It has showed also the importance of collective efforts and international cooperation, yet, unfortunately, it has led the countries to be more inverted and individualists in their fights. And I rejoin what you said about what globalization are we heading to, while the pandemic, which needs collective answer, is making us shrinking into our seats and then looking at the neighbors with fright sometimes. It is only when the situation becomes critical in different countries and so on that the international solidarity is organized. It happened everywhere, and it will be still the case at least for some time. The pandemic has also widened the disparity between those which have and those which don't. I'm talking about the vaccine. It poses the most serious challenge in our modern times. As a direct consequence, when almost all countries imposed lockdowns and then closed borders, another challenge emerged, or I would say accentuated. It is food security and how countries have become to learn that they are much interdependent. Fortunately, for both Morocco and India, they didn't face this issue, but their economies, being partly reliable on agriculture, exporting products, were severely affected in almost all different fields. Millions of jobs were lost, and most governments were in serious trouble, finding themselves in a serious dilemma, having to choose between closing down the economy to reduce the propagation of the pandemic, or opening it to allow people earn their living with the risk of assuming more deaths and casualties. You all know the consequences in either decision. These new emerging challenges, for which we were not prepared, pushed all countries, including my own, to change the priorities and review in midterm their yearly budgets to take into account this new unwelcomed guests, putting also into trouble so much of the development projects. It was important to start with these new challenges, as they are similar everywhere, they are new everywhere, though they change in intensity and approach from one country to another and from one region to another. The lack of regional integration in the Maghreb Arab Union didn't help in addressing the issues collectively, even though in the ongoing crisis in Tunisia, Morocco didn't hesitate to show solidarity by sending 12 planes to this neighboring country comprising of units of oxygen, medical beds, field hospital, material and equipment to fight the pandemic. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, the unresolved Moroccan Sahara issue still prevents the countries of the region to take profit from the enormous opportunities which the 5 countries offer. It is already 46 years that this issue has been going on, despite considerable positive evolution with regards to this issue, thanks to the growing support of many friendly countries and the opening of consulates of not less than 21 Arab, Latin American, and African countries in either of the 2 major cities in this region, Dakhla and Laayoune. On the other hand, the dynamic created by the recognition of the United States of the sovereignty of Morocco on all its territory on the Sahara has been fiercely criticized by neighbors without reason except their will to keep the conflicts going on for their own self-interest. The American decision, it is to be recalled, was a surprise to our neighboring countries, though it came as a natural evolution of the American position with regard to this issue since 2007. That is when Morocco proposed a kind of large autonomy for this part of as a solution to this conflict. The persistence of this fabricated conflict leads, unfortunately, to the rising of security issues in its comprehensive form and manner. We all know that the Sahel region is vulnerable to terrorist groups, among whom a good number of the members of the Polisario armed groups are active, leading to arms, drug, and then human trafficking, and thus to the destabilization of the whole region. On the other side, armed groups have disturbed many times the free movement of people and goods between Europe, Morocco, and sub-Saharan countries in the borders of Mauritania, which provoked a serious disruption in the markets of these countries for a certain time until Morocco secured the roads and then resumed safe passage and put these armed groups out of causing trouble any further. But still, attempts of infiltrations continue every now and then. It is another yet emerging challenge which is of concern not only to Morocco and southern African countries of the Mediterranean, but for Europe as a whole. My country, in the course of time, has become not only a transit country, but also a host country for immigrants from mainly sub-Saharan Africa. It has led Morocco to undertake profound reforms and the setting up of legal framework to accommodate and give them a decent life, to give them access to public schools for their children, and then to help them into starting their new lives. But Morocco can no longer be the watchdog for Europe, which has to assume also its responsibility and have a comprehensive approach to this issue, while only looking to very short-term solutions and a comprehensive global approach. During the 5th African Union during the 5th Africa-European Union Summit in Abidjan, His Majesty King Mohamed VI delivered a speech in his capacity as the leader of the African Union on the migration issue, in which he said, and I quote, "It is not acceptable that the best African talents should be desirable by Europe and found on the benches of prestigious schools as much as in businesses on the continent, without regard for the investments made by the country of origin in terms of training. The brain drain caused by this situation is appalling." Today, I'm still quoting, a new vision is needed. We ought to turn immigration into a subject of peaceful debate and constructive exchange. I unquote. From a historical perspective, it is to be recalled that relations between Africa and Europe have always been marked by population movement and migratory flows. Tens of thousands of African migrants try each day to reach Europe, often putting their lives at risk. It is also important here to underscore that in Africa, the concept itself of borders emerged only after the independence era. During the post-colonial period, the management of immigration issues has only been moderately successful, unfortunately. Migration has systematically been perceived not as a source for solutions and opportunities, but rather as a threat and a source of desperation. Besides, all of us agree that the 21st century will be a century of large-scale human intermingling. This common sense conclusion means that we should refrain from giving any ideological, emotional, or even xenophobic twist to discourse on migration. And because of its geographical location, Morocco has been a land of immigration throughout history, and more so since the country's independence from the French protectorate. It has always been the target of several waves of immigration. There was a time when migration was connected with commercial travel and religious pilgrimages. In today's world, it has taken on a negative connotation since it is being associated with drugs and other trafficking, even with the damaging effects of climate change. To put it simply, Excellency and dear friends, in the collective mind today, immigration is associated with such scourges as poverty, precariousness, instability, and even death. In case of a burst of conflicts, immigration takes even dangerous forms. It becomes a land for a kind of trafficking and a haven for terrorist groups. For instance, in Libya, and since 2011, it has become the corridor of all evils, epitomizing all types of misfortunes. It becomes thus a regional challenge for the country, but also for its neighbors, the immediate one and the north one. The direct consequence become security, both land and maritime borders. As you know, this needs sophisticated equipment, especially that a new threat is emerging through the use now of drones, capable of flying in low altitude and remotely guided without being always detected by the riders, which we are used to. The traffickers are using more and more this means, as it does not have a human risk, and at the same time, it doesn't have difficulties to retrace the origin. This emerging new challenge is a serious one, as it involves different countries. So intelligence sharing becomes a must more than ever. It's no longer a choice. But recent events between Morocco on the one side and Spain on the other side seem to have affected the cooperation in the fight against different traffics, with Spain especially, as with Algeria, cooperation is literally suspended since a long time ago. We can extend on this during the discussions if you like. Another challenge, I believe, is the climate change and all its consequences. All the North African countries have parts of the Sahara in the south, and so they are vulnerable to desertification, to scarcity of drinking water. A collective approach to reduce the effects of desertification could be much beneficial to all of the countries concerned by this scourge. But there seems to be no coordination in this domain. How much important it is, and which will be responsible for many human movements, including more migration of the population affected. We already see that in many areas and then in good numbers. But securing energy will remain a challenge for many countries, including ours, that is Morocco and India, especially that they don't have oil and then enough fossil sources of energy besides being polluted. So energy transition and renewable ones offer a real opportunity and could be turned from a challenge to an opportunity. And here I would like to open the parenthesis and then thank India for the Solar Alliance, which has been launched and then which includes very innovative solutions for the electrification and then ensuring development of Africa. I also would like to mention here that Morocco has launched with Nigeria, and then they will be starting very soon a very big pipeline that will take the gas from Nigeria towards Europe, passing by 13 countries, Morocco, and then it reaches Europe. I think the strategic outreach of this project is that it will ensure electrification for all those countries which don't have gas, but also it will ensure transport of the gas for those who have. So it will be a very structuring project that are done by the African countries for their African peers and then other countries. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, foreign interference is certainly a serious challenge facing Morocco in its region and then many other countries. The reality in all this is that Morocco starts to disturb many countries economically and militarily, countries which still have the upper colonialist thinking and behavior, I would say. Morocco has changed and is becoming a regional power which the immediate eastern and the northern neighbors refuse to admit and deny it this new status. We know that they do whatever possible and they will in their capacity to weaken it and then slow the pace of its development. Keeping the Sahara issue unresolved is only one of these tools besides cybersecurity threats. The last episodes that you have been following with the Amnesty International and forbidden stories, with the idea of many foreigners, heads of states, and also journalists were spied by many countries, including Morocco, which is having no true basis. We can come on this discussion if you like later on. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the second part of today's, I have left few of the challenges for the discussion because it's always nice to interact and then see people directly and then discuss with them. The second part of today's conference is the role of Morocco along with its partners in development and stability of Africa. As an African nation, in fact, as an African very old nation, Morocco has occupied a privileged position in Northwest Africa, and observers have sometimes compared it to an antenna reflecting African concerns across the world. Today, Morocco's African policy is built on open and proactive diplomatic discourse, calling for a break with third worldism, between brackets, the construction of pessimistic discourse, non-interference on ongoing democratization processes, and the modeling of intra-African cooperation based on sovereign appropriation of African wealth. Its constant projection has made the tactical and strategic choice to focus action on specific areas that can be controlled and that generate significant added value. I would mention military cooperation, religious diplomacy, humanitarian diplomacy and crisis management, civil military training, service economics, food security, and then I would go on and on. In his speech on the occasion of the third India-Africa Forum Summit held in New Delhi in 2015, His Majesty set the tone for the kind of cooperation that Africa needs from its partners, while hailing the innovative ideas of the forum and the commitment of India in the development and well-being of the African countries. He said, I quote, "The third India-Africa Forum Summit is an opportunity for us to assess South-South cooperation, which is the cornerstone of the African-Indian partnership. The forum should serve as a platform to lay the foundations for an efficient, solidarity-based, multilateral, dimensional South-South cooperation model, through which we can make optimal use of these resources and potentially available in our countries. Our cooperation, therefore, has to turn the page on the legacy of the past and seek to serve our country's strategic interests. The South-South cooperation, or some people like to call it the developing cooperation between developing countries, we are yearning for, is neither a mere slogan nor a political luxury. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, Africa needs substantial economic development to achieve social economic progress. This cannot be achieved without security and stability, which remains the backbone for achieving meaningful development initiatives. Therefore, Africa, I believe, is in need of reliable and credible partners like India and Morocco to have a comprehensive approach if we take into account the numerous challenges it faces today and the growing terrorist threats which different regions and countries are encountering more and more. While we were speaking at a certain stage of the acme only in the Sahel, you would find that the intensity of Shabab in the eastern part is becoming more and more notable. Then you have the Boko Haram in the Central Africa, in the belt, and then go back to the Central West. Then lately, even down towards Daesh, which has reached as far as the southern parts of the African continent, Mozambique to name only but this country. Africa deserves fair partnerships rather than unbalanced relationships and conditional support, as His Majesty has always pointed out. What is meant here is that traditional models of different forms of cooperation can no longer meet the growing needs for a young population aspiring for a better future legitimately. Being fully aware of these legitimate aspirations, Morocco has developed steadily its cooperation with African brotherly and friendly countries based on win-win relations. Morocco, which relations with sub-Saharan Africa go for centuries back, stands today as the second largest African investor in the continent and the first one in West Africa, ensuring the largest presence in the bank system and insurance systems in all of Africa. It also contributes largely in ensuring the food security through the fertilizers and then the units it has set up. The domains are as varied as food security, banking, insurance sector, air connectivity, cement and fertilizer factories, agro-industry and pharmaceutical units. The objective is the valuation of products and then bringing added values to them while ensuring also more job opportunities. Africa, should we remember, is a rich continent. It's also the continent of the future. It is rich by its own resources, which unfortunately most of them have been exploited by others, rich by its young population and by its rich history. Africa has many partners, or I would say here rather many countries are partnering with Africa. But are their concepts of partnership based on mutual benefits is implemented? Can we all think of setting tangible projects both at the bilateral level and within the framework of triangular cooperation? Can we make it a global one in productive areas which boost development, create jobs, and have a direct impact on the citizens' lives, where the population find themselves in, where they found themselves involved? Both India and Morocco's growing diversified partnerships with a number of African states in the areas of human development, as well as in various social, economic, and religious fields, clearly illustrates the positive role they are playing, and then they can even play more for the stability and development of Africa. Their cooperation can give a good example for others. The approach for Africa should not be based on aid and assistance, as His Majesty again said in one of his speeches. Africa does not need assistance as much as it needs mutual beneficial partnerships, as well as human and social projects. I am not being pessimistic at all by mentioning these things. And all of us know that few countries have put the development of Africa at the heart of their foreign policies. There are. They have in fact contributed undoubtedly to the stability and the development of the continent and many countries. I don't want to single out any country so that I do not make mistakes. But certainly the image of India, free of any colonial legacy, and which has a huge diaspora, especially in Eastern Africa, enjoys a tremendous respect and admiration as well in most of the countries of the African continent. Africa's stability has also been at the heart of Morocco's foreign policy, and its return to its family at the African Union helps a lot in implementing this policy, which all countries of the continent recognize, because we believe we have few things to share. We have built up experiences and expertise that we develop, and then we are quite happy to benefit from other experiences, but at the same time to show the others and then share what we have learned throughout history. India-Africa Forum, to my mind, constitutes, in my humble opinion, a very good platform through which a difference could be made. I hope that the coming 4 summits will take into consideration all these concerns. Now the concept of stability of countries has evolved also. It includes the reinforcement of health infrastructure and the independence in producing the vaccines. We call it the sovereignty of vaccines. No country could be better than India in helping African countries reach at least partly this important objective. A new form, unfortunately, of segregation and racism has been created by the pandemic, making the rich shrinking and thinking about themselves, and making the poor still looking and waiting for something to come from the skies, the vaccines to protect the population, which can no longer, and then very soon they can no longer go even to work and then make their studies in other countries, including Europe and the US. I'm quite confident that future prospects are promising, and African-Indian partnership can develop further and prosper owing to the complementarities between the two sides, their resources and skills mainly. I will end up by reiterating what I have always said in different occasions. Morocco will be happy to join hands with reliable partners, especially India, to launch joint initiatives and ventures for the development of Africa. There are a number of sectors where either of or both the two countries enjoy a good level of expertise and have accumulated a decent level of experience to share. Sectors like energy, drinking water, health sector, agriculture, maritime and land border security, to name by these, could be important sectors to create jobs, reduce the need to illegal immigration, ensure a decent living, and then ensure co-development and stability of the African continent. I thank you for your cooperation and attention.
Excellency, it was indeed very perceptive, very candid, intellectually stimulating, and I think a forward-looking address which we heard from you. I will give my comments on various aspects which you have just now outlined. But before that, I would request President of the PIC, Dr. Mashelkar, he would like to say a few words, both with respect to your address as well as his own perceptions and his thoughts about India's relationship with Morocco, with Africa, as well as the need for technology in bringing these two countries and the continents together. May I request Dr. Mashelkar to kindly address us first. Dr. Mashelkar, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. His Excellency, Mr. Mohamed Maliki, your address was most stimulating, most inspiring, most thought-provoking. And as Ambassador Devre said, very candid. I have a number of lessons that I have taken from this. I think as far as our own series is concerned, the Ambassador Speaks, it was all about learning the new global geopolitical dynamic, and particularly to learn about the view of India as seen from the lens of great global thought leaders, you being one of them. And we have always thought that the great distinguished ambassadors of different nations have a view from a vantage position. And thank you for sharing this with us. It has been terrific. A personal word, I must say, Morocco, of course, is a favored land with mystical cities like Marrakesh, Casablanca, etc. I personally have been to Casablanca. It was a very major event where the World Intellectual Property Organization is represented by 176 nations. I was chairing the standing committee which was discussing the issues of intellectual property rights versus the rights of the poor. How can we bring them sort of together? So it is not intellectual property rights versus the rights, but intellectual property rights and the rights of the poor. And the Casablanca Declaration and the deliberations, of course, showed the way forward. So my personal reflection on this. I would just sort of summarize a couple of things. I think the first is, as we all recognize that Africa is the promise of the future, continent of the future. And as you rightly said, His Excellency, the partnerships have to be stable. They have to be based on mutual trust and respect. And it is not the aid, but the trade. That is how sort of we have to move. There is no question. I think you are very explicit on that. The second is, of course, Morocco itself. The great strategic geographic position that we have, the political stability that we have. You already become a strategic financial hub, recognized as a middle power in global affairs. And therefore, I strongly believe that Morocco will not only play a great role in Africa's future, but India's future. And the last point I want to make is that the future lies in not just security and stability, but also sustainability, climate change, and other issues. His Excellency, you referred to inequalities that are increasing, and particularly in the pandemic, we have been hit badly. But there are issues there are ways of reducing these inequalities through technology, which is inclusive. How do you make access equality possible despite income inequality? And India has many such technologies, which can be helpful. So our best partnerships could be in these areas. I'm sort of firmly convinced you and all of us are committed to creating a better world. And I'm quite sure Africa, Morocco is going to play a big role in that context. So we really are very, very grateful to you for accepting our invitation and enlightening us and showing some new ways of thinking. I have taken down, as you can see, some notes here.
I'm honored. I'm honored, sir.
So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Mashelkar. Yeah, I think all of us have taken notes, and what Ambassador outlined, 5-6 points. I think I'll go through them at the end of my comments. But before that, I believe there are a number of questions. And Abhay, I think those questions are with you. Can you just ask the concerned individuals to raise them, or would you just like to mention those points to Excellency the Ambassador?
Yes, sir. I would like to read out the questions. So there's a comment and a question from Mr. Vilas Rajwade. So he says, thanks a lot for your excellent presentation, Your Excellency. I have learned a lot. He wishes to know top 3 or 4 things that India and Morocco could do together to improve the tourism as well as industrial economic ventures.
Tourism industry.
Industry and tourism, sir. Cooperation in industry and tourism, sir.
Okay. Shall I go?
Yeah.
All right. I think, personally, when we come to relations, apart from Ibn Battuta, who is from Morocco, and all those ancient things, but there are 2 sets of dates, or I would say, before the visits of His Majesty in 2015, and then the time after 2015. Why I said this? Because in the meeting of the 2 leaders, that they decided to elevate the relations into a strategic partnership. And then when we say strategic partnership, it doesn't mean for us a paper that we will write, and then we say, we have decided to write and to do a strategic partnership, and then that's it. No? I was the head of the Asia division, taking care from Iran to New Zealand in my ministry for almost 10 years. So I knew in the end the growing interests of Morocco in this part. In fact, this question gives me a very good opportunity to tell you that one of the strategic decisions which Morocco has taken, and His Majesty, of course, as the leading foreign policy, the diversification of partnerships. Because to a certain extent, all our business communities have their heads turned towards Europe, some of them towards the Arab countries, and to a certain extent to the American side. But when we decided to diversify the partnerships, it made some other countries unhappy because of the reasons you know. I think India stands of the top 3 of the diversification of these partners. When he decided with the Narendra Modi to elevate the relations to the strategic partnership, they meant cementing the relations, taking them to a higher level, including strategic and then security issues, what we call commonly sensitive areas, including counterterrorism, sharing of information, sharing of intelligence, but also in defense. I can tell you without taking the tribute personally, but being pride also of being part of it, that since that time we have been able to conclude 43 agreements with India with as much varied sectors as you can imagine. They also include tourism. Now tourism, unfortunately, has become almost the orphan of this pandemic, because all those sectors related to tourism have been affected seriously with what's happening around the world, because it affects the travels, air travels, it affects restaurants, hotellerie sectors, it affects also the millions of jobs which people in the travel agents and so on and so and so. So what we did, all the ingredients are here to launch seriously a very good cooperation in tourism between Morocco and India. In fact, the tourism office of Morocco was expected to be here in 2019. Then there was some delay because there is a very unique, selective manner of choosing people. India being an important country, all those who went for the bid were not as much a caliber to bring them to India. I'm being quite honest with you, with all that honesty can bring altogether. The moment we knew the person who would be coming, it was in February. The person was expected to reach here by April. We had his name. We also helped into identifying from the offices where he could be. The lockdowns imposed itself to all of us. And when we say lockdowns, mean that even the area of the job he is coming to start was not available, because without traffic, without air links, you cannot develop tourism. So it's there. The number of tourism countries is growing. We have facilitated easily visa access by outsourcing the visa to some specialized agencies, which have also their offices in different parts of India. It's our attempt to bring the administration close to them instead of bringing them this side. The third element which we did, we also concluded a new generation air agreement, which allows any company from India or any company from Morocco to start flights once they are viable. Now, as you all can understand, the eternal question, should we start by bringing the flights, or should we wait until the critical number of tourists will start and then move? So this is a question which nobody would answer, because everybody has a different perspective out of it. But the number of Moroccans is growing both into the tourism, health tourism, and also for those who would like to go to come to India for exotic places, to enjoy the yoga, to enjoy the places, because there are limitless places where to go in India. Likewise, Indians have started to get the taste of getting married in Morocco, having their weddings there, because I have always believed, and then I said it, the closest country in the Arab world to Morocco in terms of dresses in terms of food remains Morocco. When the number of people, Indian people living in the United States and then in India, don't have enough time to come to India, when they feel homesick, they would go to Morocco and enjoy a long weekend. That is set for the tourism. In industry, that is a long discussion to go with. I think when I reached and then I had the honor of representing my country to this great continent, I would say that because it's so much diversified, and then there are so many possibilities that offer that we address regions differently while being under the same umbrella. The number of companies which were present in Morocco were between 11 and 13. Now we count not less than 30 to 33, which means that the interests, when I came here, let me be of an anecdotal side. Two things. The first one, when I was addressing the travel agents and then people to encourage tourism. After which, later on, my Minister of Tourism came. I used to tell people we are this tourist destination, and then we receive 12 to 13 million tourists. But I would say in the eyes of all people around me that they just didn't get the idea and the number. So one time I told them, I have very good news for your tourism sector as well. I think this year you will be receiving something like 420 million tourists. Then they say, oh my God, from where did you bring these figures? It cannot happen. For 100 millions, we hardly receive 8 millions. I say, well, ladies and gentlemen, that is exactly proportionally what we receive in Morocco. We are 36 and we receive 13 million. So their approach or their understanding of tourism, the scale of India is also changed. Because India is large with billions economy of dollars economy. The proportion is always different, and then the scale is always very different. In industry, the perspectives I can assure you are very promising. I can't reveal a few things we're working in, but I think when I came at the beginning, I was talking to people and I would tell them that Morocco offers for you a very good platform to export both to Africa and then many other countries, including the United States. That was even the time before the problem of the textile with the United States happened. All right? We have a free trade agreement with the United States, which encompasses you to export anything which has been made partly or totally in Morocco towards. If you include the African World Trade now, the ZLECA, that is the Africa Free Trade Zone, which encompasses all the 54 countries of Africa, it gives you access to not less than 2.4 billion consumers, including the Europe and then including the United States, including some Arab world. So the platform, when I said at the beginning, it was not something which people would understand, but later on they start to adopt themselves this speech. They knew the importance of being there in different sectors, including the offshoring, including the communication, including the internet, including the plastics, including energy. We are a leader in our region and in worldwide we are in fact a champion in energy. In our energy mix, we have already reached, before the targets, 42% of our needs. It's huge. Now Europe is requesting us to get clean energy from Morocco. So you know that these carbon taxes can be quite beneficial from countries which are reducing the emission of gas. That's one of the sectors also where India and Morocco can cooperate very easily. We already introduced the request to become member of the ISA, the International Solar Alliance. And I think it was also pushed by France because France believed that we play a very important role in terms of ensuring not only food security in Africa, but also into energy. And I think that is one of the domains where the two countries can cooperate very easily. And then I think I'm inviting all people, though you have already some of the companies already there of energy. I think we have 2 to 3 who are developing renewable energies there in Morocco. And then because the perspective to Europe is very important. There are a few sectors which are getting in. I cannot speculate a bit more, but I can assure you that there is a high interest into getting to security issues, to defense cooperation, to the space industry, and then to so many areas. In fact, when you have a country like India without limits, and then Morocco for India is without limits, nothing becomes a taboo to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Mr. Vaidya, are there any other questions?
Yes, sir. There's one more question.
Yeah, please.
From Mr. Hanif Shaikh.
Loudly, please.
Sir, the question from Mr. Hanif Shaikh is, how is trade between India and Morocco stacked? How can bilateral trade be promoted further?
Would you like to answer that, Excellency, or I think you have touched upon, but would you like to comment?
I think the person when he asks, he wants to have figures. The figures of 2019 stood to almost $2 billion exchange, which is not a small amount. It is still in the favor of Morocco because of the phosphates,
Potash, yeah.
and potash and derivatives, and then also for the fertilizers. And if I open the brackets here, let me tell you that the largest investments that Morocco has in Asia exists in India.
Is it? Oh, I see.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
We have few joint ventures with Indian companies, with also public companies, to transform. That's why we are talking about the valuation of the products, to transform the phosphates into fertilizers, because the needs of India are huge. And then let me assure you that when we did it, when His Majesty decided also with India, it was taken from a political point of view. He instructed all the concerned stakeholders to help India ensuring its food security. It's crucial, it's very important. Now, if we take, I think we are trying to have a certain balance between the two countries by encouraging either, for instance, investments, or by creating new ideas. And I think there are a few things which, unfortunately, my job responsibilities cannot let me say, but there is quite an awareness to find a certain balance, and also to increase some of the investments of Morocco here, because we exist in some of the pharmaceutical industries. We also are in the fertilizers, maybe also in the tourism sectors. So new things are opening up. That's why I'm telling you this building up of this strategic partnership, the concretes and foundations have been there. Now, as an embassy or as a government or as an administration, my role is to facilitate and then create the conditions for any investors, both here and there, facilitate the movements between the people, which we did. In fact, we decided also for business communities to give 1-year visa with multiple entries to help them into moving and then getting back. It only simply needs that you confirm from some of the professional associations that you are a businessman. And then I think the movement is quite moving both sides, and then the perspectives are very promising.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Abhay, are there any other questions?
So one last question about the India-Africa Forum Summit, which, Your Excellency, you spoke about. how this could be a platform for partnership which is mutually beneficial to the nations in Africa and cooperation with India. Could you elaborate in terms of focus areas or direction that this forum should take, sir?
I think I have a little bit touched upon this idea, but I'm pleased to maybe go a little bit into details. Since the inception of the India-Africa Forum in 2008, there has been big debates and then discussions. But the real form of the forum took its own wings in 2015 because it has a very good vision from the Prime Minister. There was also consequent means and then money on the table for the making the projects, but also the number of heads of states which had already spoken about the importance of India in the African minds, in the African mindsets, that we want to go further, we want to move. India is definitely present in Africa, there is no doubt. And then there are so many success stories, especially in the Eastern African countries. Maybe there is a little bit more effort to be done in the Western African countries because probably of the language, something which we face also when we go to the Eastern African countries. Yeah. So my idea have always been to help each other. From one side, Morocco, into getting much more to go jointly in the eastern parts of Africa and southern parts of Africa, and then help India into much more business in the Western Africa because of the capital of esteem and the history that we have shared together with this part of the world. As I said, we are #1 investor in West Africa, African investor. Mm-hmm. And then this new status, I mentioned it before, disturbs, I would say, the previous country because we are taking a bit of the business from them. But in fact, Africa has enough business for everybody. It's only the approach and then the way to do business which make difference. Now we have, and then and then so many studies have been done. What are the advantages, the strengths, the shortages of the Africa-India Forum? Many have agreed that there are probably some hurdles in terms of administration, in terms of bureaucracy, in terms of implementation. So maybe projects take a little bit more time. But the will, I believe, always when there is the will, political will from both sides, all other things will come. Yeah. It will be difficult. Now, priorities have certainly grown up. And then the pandemic has shown new areas which we use to concentrate on, but not to the extent we should. The priority of the priority is to save lives, to save human lives. But I think it's one of the sectors which is quite important for all of the African countries to reduce the disparity about which the President have already spoken earlier. We need to ensure that African countries have their say in the future. We need to reform the multilateralism because it no longer represents the world as it used to be in 1945. Morocco has said it high and loudly that we support India to become a member of the Security Council, not only because we want it, but because it deserves it, because it brings quite a lot to the international community, that it is the most reliable voice for the developing countries. The advantage of India is also many countries identify themselves with the success story of India. And then, as you rightly said, dear sir, to just remember your good name, Marshal Carr, you rightly said that technology, which India has certainly years and years ahead of many of even the developed countries, can share and then find solutions to all of the, at least part of the problem that Africa is facing, including desalination of water, because it's becoming, it will be part of it. Part of the packages, the focus will be on saving lives. Saving lives, what does it mean? Ensuring more and more agriculture, ensuring food security, combating against the desertification because of the consequences of the immigration. People are leaving their home. Nobody wants to leave their home if they find necessary and basic elements: electricity, water, internet, education, healthcare, schools, all these. And I think the fourth summit, to my mind, should focus on the human development, and then it should put it at the center of all that comes, because the industry cannot grow if the people are not happy into developing this. When you make people interested in what you do, they also feel part of it. They take the ownership. What we need is that we need to make the ownership and then appropriate our own developments in the continents by getting help, but also by helping the way they have. And everybody, every country had their own share to put. The fourth summit will certainly concentrate on building infrastructure, because connectivity is quite important to all of us. And then even now, with the health sector, if you have even the equipment and you don't have connectivity, you cannot reach these people. So connectivity, health infrastructure, healthcare, education, telemedicine, which already is a very good, successful story. E-education, which is already a very good, successful story. That is through technology, which the president has already said. We should use technology to serve us, to develop us, and to make us better live, to make us live better for tomorrow. And then I think I have said part of the elements which are, to my mind, could be of great interest in the future or the fourth in the Africa Summit.
Thank you very much, Excellency. I think you have already more or less outlined the agenda for the India-Africa Fourth Summit.
No.
I must say it was a brilliant analysis throughout the lecture, throughout the talk which you gave.
I think Dr. Marshal Carr wants to say something.
Oh, please, Dr. Mashalkar, yes.
I want to make a comment. I mean, inspired by what you said.
Yeah.
With regard to the Indian partnerships, technology, etc. Yes, you are right. You know, when we had the crisis of HIV/AIDS, when an year's treatment required $10,000 for the entire retrieval, India came up with $300, $10,000 to $300.
Yes.
Millions of lives have been saved. That's what I meant, actually. We have technologies of affordable excellence, in a sense, highest level of technology, but very, very affordable indeed. And that is where our greatest partnerships could be. But the last point I wanted to make was that since you talked about phosphate, of course, we all depend upon Morocco and you are so rich in it. And of course, fertilizers are important, but also there are opportunities in the new technology area, the renewable energy area, of new types of value-added products made out of phosphate. For example, you look at lithium-ion batteries, right? Now, people are now talking about lithium iron phosphate batteries to be the best, you know, in terms of excellent performance or wide-ranging temperatures, high life cycles, and safe. And here in India, we have plans on building gigascale battery, gigascale scale of fuel cells, etc. So some of Morocco's strengths, you know, in terms of material and our strength in technology, and our joint interest in creating new energy, green energy, I think we should be thinking in terms of some of the new possibilities.
That is true. Maybe if I can comment what you've said, I think the person who created the smallest battery is a Moroccan guy who decided lately, I think he used also the lithium battery at the beginning. He was based in Singapore. But lately he decided to come and then create a center of excellence for the research on batteries.
Very good.
Thank you, Excellency. I think we couldn't agree with you more when you said that this healthcare, attention to this health issue requires collective effort. And I think how we can galvanize that collective effort between India and Morocco, India and Africa will remain, I think, a very crucial challenge before all of us. I think we are already paying attention to that, and so your suggestions, ideas in this regard would certainly be very useful. You made very interesting points about migration, as well as the brain drain, issues regarding intelligence sharing. I think these are all inputs. These are the ingredients in the cooperative framework that India has to have with Morocco. And I think the point which you made, Excellency, that South-South cooperation, which was the basic theme of cooperation between India and other countries, or developing countries as a whole, that needs to be further refined. And when we talk of strategic partnership, it is actually to give a clear and more concise idea to that South-South cooperation. I think India's policy toward Africa, and you referred to that countries have to have their policies to Africa now redefined, so to speak, in the context of changes in the current scenario. India has generally followed the policy of empowerment in Africa, try to help empowerment, try to assist Africa in terms of knowledge acquisition or capacity building, rather than just aid and trade. Yes. I think that approach has, I think, up till now served us well. I recall our former president, Dr. Abdul Kalam, believed greatly in telemedicine. And he, in fact, went to Africa to talk to the African leaders and African thinkers about telemedicine. I think these are the kind of ideas which will build our partnership. And as you rightly said, it is the mutual beneficial relationship that will only sustain, not relationship with only governed by considerations of profit or acquisition of land or acquisition of some kind of agricultural or resource-wise acquisition in Africa. If these were the motives, then never that kind of cooperation will not succeed. Excellency, I think 2 points which I really noted of great interest. One was your global perspective, so to speak, about trade. And when you said that India can have a market of something like 2.5 billion people, which will include the population of Africa, population of Europe, as well as population of US, because through countries like Morocco, you can have access to these markets. And if that is, I think, going to be the new kind of opportunity that India can have in terms of trade, it will be a very different ballgame. Similarly, you mentioned about tourism. Morocco has 37 million population and 13 million tourists. So proportion is almost 1/3. India can also aspire to that. So I think these are new ideas which we have learned today. Mr. Vaidya, you said so there is another panelist who would like to share thoughts on just now.
Sir, if Dr. Vijay Kelkar wishes to make...
Please. Yeah, I'm going to request them now. Yeah. We don't have much time here. Dr. Kelkar?
No, sir, I don't want to say anything more than what you said. And of course, what the distinguished ambassador spoke about. And one is really, if I may say so, Mr. Ambassador, one saw glimpses of Ibn Battuta in your sweep of your comments and your insights. So once again, let me join Dr. Mashelkar, our Ambassador Devre, to thank you for sparing your time and participate in this event. Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
Thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
So we are at the end of our program today, and I wish to thank His Excellency Ambassador Maliki for this fascinating talk on how India and Morocco could partner bilaterally and multilaterally. And Your Excellency, the thoughts and ideas that you presented, the avenues for cooperation, the future direction that the India-Africa Summit Forum could take are all extremely valuable inputs from this discussion. I also wish to thank Ambassador Devre for chairing this session. Thank you, Dr. Mashelkar, for your thoughts and for bringing in the point of science and technology and clean energy cooperation. Thank you, Dr. Kelkar. And with this, I would like to state that this event comes to a close. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.